that.
Yeah.
But you're on the right spot.
I was heading back to the Victorian High Country for a 5-day ride with a couple of mates. My partners in crime on this trip were Nick on his KTM 690 and Coco on his Husky 501. We had trailered our bikes down to Jindabyne and we were spending our first night in Thredbo. Now, in the title of this video, I call the High Country beautiful and intimidating. And let me explain why I find it intimidating. First of all, there are hundreds, if not thousands of trails through the High Country, but the terrain is just so steep that if you don't know where you're going, you can easily find yourself in hot water. And you'll see that's something we found ourselves in on day 3. The plan for day 1 was to go to Tom Grogan and cross the Murray, and then ride down via Omeo to Dargo for the night. Our first challenge was crossing the Murray at Tom Grogan, but luckily for us the water levels were low, so it was a pretty straightforward crossing. When we got to Tom Grogan, we had to choose which track to take to Omeo. And I was planning to take the Davies Plain track, but that was closed. Mount Anderson I knew was pretty tough, so I opted for the easiest track, which was Tom Grogan. We started climbing on a little tricky track straight away, and I think this is kind of the Vic High Country's way of saying to New South Welshmen, you can't get up this hill, you might as well just turn around and go back across the Murray. It was certainly a welcome to the Vic High Country. We got to the junction of Mount Anderson Road, and I'd heard it was a really nice track up there, but I'd also heard that the last section climbing Mount Gibbo was especially tricky. But we thought we'd give it a go. This is where we approached the hill climb, and it just got steeper and looser as we got near the top. And don't you hate it when you stall on a hill and you lean downhill and your foot just can't hold the bike?
Let's get this happening. All right. Turn around, we'll go back the other way.
You mean back? Okay.
That's from Coco as well.
So on Tom Grogan track?
All right.
So with our tail between our legs, we retreated. It was Vic High Country 1, New South Welshman 0. We headed back to the easier track to Omeo. And when we got down into the valley, the riding was just beautiful, absolutely picturesque. We arrived in Dargo, refilled the bikes, and settled into the Dargo Hotel for about 1,000 beers. Day 2, and I was excited to take the guys on a ride that I had done once before, which is the famous Blue Rag ride. I think this has got to be just one of the most spectacular rides in the Victorian High Country. Part of the ride was pretty gentle. It was a nice warm-up, and we just sort of slowly gained elevation and headed north to Blue Rag. Now at about this point, I realised that Nick was choosing to get payback on me for some of the comments and editing that I had done on the Iceland video.
Hang on, let me wipe my GoPro lens again. Thank you. Ah! Oh, for fuck's sake! For fuck's sake! Oh, I gave you a chair. Yes, Blue Rag. We're heading up to Blue Rag.
As we approached Blue Rag, the hills became steeper, but they were still a lot of fun to ride. Just before we hit the Blue Rag range track, we took a breather and just soaked in the views, which were amazing. I had talked up Blue Rag to the guys, so we were all pretty excited by the time we got onto the Blue Rag track. I called for the guys to pull over momentarily so I could get the drone out.
Now we'll get a shot.
This has to be probably one of the best rides in Australia in terms of, you know, shooting from a drone. It's just spectacular. I think the Blue Rag track just epitomizes adventure riding. It's stunning on the way there. It doesn't give its views up easily. You've got to work hard to get up to the top of Blue Rag, but oh my God, is it worth it. We were just rewarded by an incredible 360-degree panorama from the top of Blue Rag. Day 3, and this is where things went a little bit pear-shaped. This is where we were intimidated by the Vic High Country. So what had happened is I had gotten a track off one of my buddies who I know rides Vic High Country pretty well. And it was called Dargo to Omeo the Fun Way. And what could go wrong with that, hey? I received this track and I made a big mistake. I assumed that my buddy, who rides the same bike as me, had ridden this track. And that was a problem. The ride started beautifully, and we were all expecting just a fun, adventurous, not too challenging a ride. There were some fun hills to climb and descend, but nothing that really gave us too much cause for concern at this stage. Then we got intimidated by the mountains, and let me explain what happened. So it happened here, about a quarter of the way into the ride. Now, when you look at maps, maps are very deceiving and they don't show you the landscape, but let me show you what it looked like. This was the point where we had problems. So we rode down the Gidley track, no problems. And then we got to the junction of the Stora track and we looked over and we saw this thing went down pretty steeply. And I think every adventure biker fears a descent that is so steep they can't get back up again. But I wasn't too worried because this track had been referred to me and I thought, well, no one's going to give us a track if we can't get back up the other side. So off we went down into the valley. We had some water crossings, which we weren't too worried about. And then we had to get out the other side. And that is where the drama started. Oh, and to make matters worse, a big thunderstorm was forecast to come in that afternoon. So let me show you what it actually looked like. This just wasn't a little drop. This was a long, steep hill. And you had to be really, really careful getting down there because the surface was slippery and it was very easy to just lose it on the downhill.
I am not riding up this track.
The video never does it justice, but Coco called it. He said, we're not getting back up this track.
So I hope you got a plan B if that's the plan. There it is. There it is.
And the water crossings, they weren't too bad. We had two of them, pretty easy, but it's fair to say that our anxiety levels were starting to rise as we rode up the valley, thinking about getting out of here. Fun track all of a sudden didn't seem to be quite so much fun. After the second water crossing, we started the uphill ascent. And it's fair to say that, yeah, the further we got, the more anxious we became about that ride out because we were looking at the landscape in front of us.
You up, Coco?
And we continued to climb and it was just getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And I'm not 25 anymore. It takes a lot of energy going up these long, steep hills. And then we turned a corner and my heart sunk as I saw a very steep, very loose, long hill in front of me. Not only was this hill long and steep, but it's actually quite technical with the erosion mounds. You've got to really work with your throttle, you've got to feather the clutch. It's quite technically tricky.
Whoa! Oh, oh.
Coco both managed to get to the top of that steep, nasty hill.
I think I can get going from here.
Now at this stage, my confidence was knocked around a little bit, mainly because I just thought this track was going to be the fun way to Omeo. But now I needed to have a closer look at the track. While I had done a little bit of research on the track beforehand, now all of a sudden I was studying the contour lines with a great deal of detail. And I saw that we had still a lot of hill to climb, but even worse than that, as I followed it round, we descended back into the valley, back down to the river. And what really alarmed me was I saw an even steeper, much longer hill coming back out the other side. When I got back to Sydney, I had a good look at the elevation profiles and it confirmed what I saw out there on the map. Here we were stuck on the first hill, but we were going back down the valley and we had a much longer, much steeper second hill to navigate. I think this picture of Nick captures the mood perfectly. We were trying to work out whether we were going to be spending the night in a hut or paying for helicopters to come and tow our bikes out of here. So ultimately, we did manage to pull and push the bike up that first hill. And then luckily, at the top of the hill, we saw another track that took us off to a dirt road. While that proved to be a bit tricky to ride, it was nothing like those steep valleys, and we managed to ride our way down to the dirt road. And I can tell you, a dirt road has never looked so good before. And while the storm was closing in, we felt pretty comfortable now being on the dirt road, and we made our way to Omeo and then back to Sydney with no further misadventures. But big lesson for me, I will never assume someone's ridden a track. I'm going to double check that and do my own research every time. That's my lesson learned.